What if I told you autism isn't a disorder, but a system failure? Not in the person, but in the world around them. For decades, autism has been framed as a condition that needs to be corrected, something to fix, manage, or erase. But what if everything we've been told is wrong? What if the real problem is the way we've been trained to think about difference? At Next Level Studios, we're here to keep you educated and informed because when you're stuck inside the system, it's hard to see the system. And the way society treats autism, that system is broken. Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is not a disease. It's a neurological difference, a different operating system, a different way of experiencing the world. But instead of building environments that support that difference, we label it as dysfunction. A child who avoids eye contact is called rude. A teen who flaps their hands is called disruptive. An adult who struggles in social situations is called awkward or unprofessional. So we try to change them, force them to act normal, mask, medicate, minimize, all while ignoring the truth. They were never broken, our definition of normal is. And now, with autism diagnoses rising faster than ever, it's time we stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's wrong with the system that keeps getting it wrong. Because this isn't just about autism, it's about humanity. Autism isn't a single story, it's a spectrum, wide, deep, and often misunderstood. One child might be nonverbal, struggling to process sensory overload. Another might speak fluently, but be unable to read body language or understand sarcasm. One adult might need full-time care. Another might run a company, but crumble during small talk. The range is vast, but the system treats them all the same. From the moment a child is flagged for different behavior, they're pushed into evaluations, IEPs, and school plans that don't reflect their actual needs. They're measured against neurotypical standards. If they don't make eye contact, they're labeled disrespectful. If they stim to self-soothe, they're told to stop. If they hyperfixate, they're redirected away from the very thing that brings them calm. It's not care, it's control. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. Black and brown children on the spectrum are misdiagnosed at far higher rates. Instead of receiving autism evaluations, they're labeled defiant, disobedient, or emotionally disturbed. Their needs are treated as threats, not symptoms. And those labels stick through school, into adulthood, and often into the justice system. This isn't just mismanagement, it's systemic neglect. And while parents beg for answers, they're handed long wait lists, denied services, or told it's just a phase. Entire families are left to fight through red tape while their child slips through the cracks. Autism isn't the problem. The lack of understanding is. And when support systems are built on fear, ignorance, or profit, everyone loses. Let's talk about the rise in autism diagnoses. In the 1970s, autism was rare, affecting around 1 in 10,000 children. Today, it's closer to 1 in 36. That's not just a rise, it's an explosion. And with that explosion comes confusion, fear, and controversy. Some say it's just better awareness. Others blame overdiagnosis. But some ask a harder question. What if something in our environment is contributing to this rise, something the system doesn't want to talk about? Food preservatives, heavy metals, vaccine debates, environmental toxins, overstimulation from technology at early ages. This isn't conspiracy, it's consequence. When you bombard developing brains with chemicals, processed food, and digital overload, something changes. And instead of investigating every possibility, the system protects its profits. Meanwhile, families are left confused. They want answers, they want truth, but they're handed labels and prescriptions instead. And here's what's even more dangerous. We're creating a generation of children that are deeply sensitive to the world around them, while placing them in a world that refuses to change. Bright lights, loud sounds, chaotic classrooms, rigid testing, no accommodations. And then we wonder why these kids struggle. Maybe autism didn't explode. Maybe it was always there, misunderstood, misdiagnosed, mislabeled. Or maybe our environment shifted faster than our evolution could keep up. Either way, the system wasn't ready. And now, instead of reforming it, we're blaming the children. But you can't medicate away a mismatch between human design and artificial systems, and you can't fix the future by ignoring what's happening in plain sight. Now let's talk about school, the place where most autistic children first set up to fail. The modern school system wasn't built for neurodivergent minds. It was built for obedience, conformity, and compliance. Sit still, make eye contact, follow directions, raise your hand, memorize, perform. But what happens when a child's brain isn't wired to learn that way? For an autistic student, the classroom can be a war zone. The flickering fluorescent lights feel like strobe lights. The hum of electricity becomes unbearable noise. Unpredictable schedules cause anxiety. Group work becomes torture. Recess isn't relief, it's chaos. And when that child melts down, can't sit still, or struggles to communicate, the school doesn't ask why. It labels the behavior disruptive, defiant, or uncooperative, and punishment follows. Detentions, suspensions, restraints, or worse, shipped off to special programs designed to isolate, not empower. The goal isn't to understand the child. The goal is to manage them. And if that child is black or brown, the punishments are harsher, the labels come faster, and the road to juvenile detention becomes a pipeline. Let's be real, many autistic students aren't being educated. They're being pushed out quietly. And what's lost in the process? Genius, creativity, brilliance, innovation. Because the same system that silences autistic voices today is the same system that would have failed Einstein, Tesla, and Newton. The question isn't, can autistic kids learn? It's, can we finally build a system that knows how to teach them? Now imagine you survive the school system barely. You graduate, you age out of services, and suddenly all support disappears. Autism doesn't end at 18, but the resources often do. There are few programs for autistic adults, few job training opportunities tailored to their needs, few social support networks, and even fewer employers willing to accommodate differences in communication, routine, or sensory preferences. So what happens? Thousands of brilliant, capable autistic adults are left isolated, unemployed, underestimated, or worse, stuck in systems that ignore their potential and treat them like burdens. They're told they don't fit in the workplace because they avoid small talk, or need headphones, or struggle with fluorescent lighting. But what's never mentioned is that these same people often have superior focus, honesty, attention to detail, and creative problem-solving abilities. It's not the person that doesn't fit the workplace. It's the workplace that refuses to evolve. And that isolation leads to depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts. Because imagine spending your entire life being told you're too much, too different, too difficult, when the truth is, no one ever tried to understand you in the first place. The world is quick to judge autistic people for what they lack, but slow to honor what they bring. And it begs the question, what if society stopped trying to change autistic adults and started changing the environments that reject them? Because when you build the world for only one kind of mind, you miss out on every other kind of genius. Let's talk about masking. Masking is when an autistic person hides their natural behaviors to appear normal. They force eye contact. They suppress stimming. They mimic facial expressions. They rehearse small talk. They study social cues like a script, and it's exhausting. Imagine acting every moment of your life just to avoid being misunderstood, judged, or punished. That's not living, that's surviving. Many autistic people, especially women and people of color, become expert maskers. They go undiagnosed for years because they have learned how to blend in. But behind the mask, there's anxiety, depression, burnout, and identity loss. Masking might keep you safe, but it slowly erases who you really are. And yet, society rewards it. Wow, you don't even seem autistic. You're so high functioning. You must be doing great. No, they're just drowning silently in a world that refuses to let them be themselves. Now think about how many kids, teens, and adults are living this every day, performing to survive, being praised for pretending, being punished when they drop the act, and never once being told that their real self is okay. Masking isn't a solution. It's a response to rejection. And the more we reward masking, the more damage we do emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Because the goal shouldn't be to help autistic people act less autistic. The goal should be to build a world where they don't have to mask to be accepted. Let's stop for a second and ask the real question. What if the things we label as autistic behaviors are actually just different human behaviors that make neurotypical people uncomfortable? Why is avoiding eye contact considered rude, but forcing it is considered polite? Why is flapping your hands labeled a symptom, but biting your nails or bouncing your leg is just called a habit? The truth is, we don't reject autistic people because they're wrong. We reject them because they don't conform. We reject honesty when it's too blunt. We reject silence when it feels awkward. We reject emotion when it's expressed differently. But the real tragedy, we're not just rejecting behavior. We're rejecting people. Every time a teacher tells a child, stop rocking. Every time a boss says, you're too quiet to lead. Every time society says, you should act more normal. What we're really saying is, you're not acceptable as you are. And that message sinks deep. It creates shame. It creates trauma. It creates a lifetime of pretending. We don't need more behavior charts or stricter programs. We need a shift in perspective. Because autism isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's a way of being that challenges our narrow definition of what's acceptable. And maybe that's the real threat. Because when people live unapologetically in their truth, they challenge the very systems that depend on silence and sameness. Autistic people are not asking to be fixed. They're asking to be understood. And we owe them that much and more. We can't just raise awareness. We've been doing that for years. Stickers, hashtags, and autism walks don't mean much if the world remains inaccessible. We need action. Here's what that looks like. Schools must be redesigned not with more rules, but with more flexibility. That means sensory-safe classrooms, trauma-informed teachers, and personalized learning, not standardized punishment. Employers must adapt. Instead of forcing every worker into the same mold, they need to recognize that neurodivergent minds can be the most focused, creative, and reliable when given the right environment. Quiet spaces, written instructions, flexible hours, it doesn't take much, but it means everything. Families need real support, not just diagnosis. That includes therapy options that aren't built around changing behavior, but building confidence. It includes respite care, support groups, and funding for services that actually matter. And society at large needs to unlearn its biases. Stop assuming someone is rude, dumb, or dangerous because they move differently or speak differently. Stop calling someone weird when they're just being authentic. Stop silencing kids who are trying to stime instead of scream. Because the truth is, many of the people we now celebrate as geniuses, Einstein, Newton, Darwin, Michelangelo, showed traits of autism. Had they been born today, they might have been medicated into compliance or pushed into a special education program instead of being nurtured. We must do better, not later. Now, the future depends on it. Transforming autism acceptance starts with 5 powerful steps that most people overlook. Learning directly from autistic voices is crucial. Not just reading about autism, but following actual autistic creators who define their own experiences. Through accounts like Neuroclastic and ASON, you'll understand perspectives that textbooks miss. Schools need more than awareness. They need action. Push for sensory-friendly spaces and inclusive IEPs. One teacher who gets it can change a student's entire future. The same goes for workplaces. If you're in charge, create environments where people can work differently without judgment. Ask how someone works best, not if they fit your mold. Supporting key organizations makes lasting change. ASON is run by autistic people. The ARC provides essential resources like housing and job training. AWS serves often overlooked populations. Local therapy centers offer critical sensory and trauma support. But the most important step, speaking up when others won't. When someone mocks or misunderstands an autistic person, silence equals acceptance of that behavior. Real change isn't passive, it requires active voices. The world shifts when we choose different actions. These aren't just nice ideas, they're the blueprint for meaningful transformation. Start with one step today, because acceptance without action is just wishful thinking. We live in a world that rewards sameness. It praises those who follow rules, fit in, and color inside the lines. But the people who change the world, they never fit the mold. Autism doesn't need awareness anymore. It needs acceptance, inclusion, and respect. It needs a world that doesn't try to fix what isn't broken, a world that stops punishing difference and starts learning from it. Because every time we silence a child who rocks in their chair, every time we correct someone's tone, stare, or words, every time we deny a person's need for space, quiet, or routine, we don't make the world better, we make it smaller. At Next Level Studios, we're not here for safe conversations. We're here to question broken systems and speak truth that others hide, because change starts with knowledge, and real knowledge is uncomfortable, unfiltered, and undeniable. So if this documentary opened your eyes, don't just click away. Click forward, learn more, speak louder, support differently, be the teacher that sees the child, be the parent that listens instead of correcting, be the employer that chooses inclusion over image. Be the person that finally asks, what if we're the ones who need to change? Autistic people don't need to be fixed. They need to be heard.